You know, it's funny how God works. And I say that because for the last 3 months I've been doing something I've never done. And I took a job working at the State House. And I've been working in the House of Representatives. And it's been a very interesting 3 months. Somewhat disheartening, some of the things I've seen. But without knowing that, well, you know, it's been medical marijuana, the abortion, there's one more. They did the budget. There's one more thing that's real hot down there. And I got to know the people down there. I thought the Atlanta Airport takeover. Thinking you know people, you get to see them every day, you think you know them. And I watched woman after woman on, I guess it was about crossover day, stand up and tell that this heartbeat bill was just ridiculous to do to a woman. And that some women don't even know they're pregnant in 12 weeks. And each woman, we stayed there till 1 o'clock in the morning, that particular morning. Parade of women, Republican and Democrat, who came up on the well and spoke and told them it wasn't their body. You know, you can't tell us what to do with our bodies. And I watched that, and one, Vernon Jones, stood up and he talked to the guy that, he was one of the last guys that spoke. He spoke to the guy that issued the bill, started the bill, and he said, "Sir, is it not true that you, nor I, have ever had a menstrual period?" And they laughed, and he said, "I have not, sir." They sat down and they voted, and it went right out. They voted in. It was amazing. They didn't care. Well, I said they didn't care. It didn't seem as though they cared. So not knowing that, after last month's meeting, Dr. Leapart came up to me, not knowing where I was working, knew anything. He said, "Doug, I got a guy who wants to speak at our next meeting. He's a lobbyist." I said, "Really? Where?" He said, "Down the state." I said, "Okay, yeah, I'd like to hear what he has to say," because I've been trying to figure it out. So I got Bill Cannon's name, and we tried to hook up. But Bill had to go to, he's got it's a mentor, it's a son, graduating from law school today. So he couldn't make it. So he recommended Rodney Littles very highly. We met Thursday, and I got schooled. I thought I knew something about the politics I've seen, but I was really taken to school. So Rodney is from Brooklyn, Syracuse University, came to Atlanta. He was working in a guy's office, came down here to take a job with Roger Bruce, who Rodney didn't know that I went to school with. So he's telling me he came down here and he was a chief of staff. And he's used to making a little piece of money because lawmakers in New York make about $100,000 a year, and they can have staff. Our lawmakers get paid for 40 days. They make $17,500. They don't have a staff, and he accepted the job not knowing he wasn't getting paid. But they became close friends, and they've done some amazing things. And they took me to school. So without further ado, Rodney Littles.
Giving honor to God, the leader of my life, to the pastor of this great church, officers and members, thank you for having me. I'm humbled to be able to stand in for my fraternity brother, William S. Cannon V, who has a long history of being an advocate for black business in the state of Georgia. Bill, for 30 years, has been a non-paid advocate at the Capitol, advocating for increased participation in the purchasing of state goods and services by businesses that look like you and I. So I met Bill on my journey here. Actually, he met my family before I came down, because I sent my kids down here to go to college a couple of years before my wife and I moved down. My son graduated from Morehouse, praise the Lord. Took him a couple years, and more than 4. And my daughter graduated from Clark Atlanta University on time. And so my money and my children were down here, and so I followed, and my wife followed shortly thereafter their graduation. I want to say that The purpose of the request, as I understood it, was to discuss economic justice. And as Doug has pointed out, I've been an assistant at the Capitol with State Representative Roger Bruce. He's now in House District 61. He's a former vice president at Atlanta Life and in the human resource area. And he's a graduate of Morehouse College, and he stayed after he got graduated. Roger got his start in politics in the Maynard Jackson campaign. He was a student at Morehouse, and a lot of students got involved in the Maynard for mayor election, and he subsequently worked for Maynard in his law practice, and then followed him as he became mayor. What I'm going to talk to you about today, Bill asked me to go over a couple of things. I'm going to talk about silver rights, S-I-L-V-E-R, silver rights. The Surface Transportation Act of 1978. I'm going to discuss the governor's executive order, at that time, Zell Miller, governor's participation report, and I'm going to discuss some issues regarding reparations. My bio is in there, so I'm not going to go into it, but I'll just give you a little bit of a background. I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My mother and father were at a party, and I wanted to come out and play. So I came early. I was a premature baby. Having grown up in Brooklyn, I got the opportunity to go to a high school called Brooklyn Technical High School, and it prepared me for understanding how to take a concept, put it on paper, and turn it into 3D. It was a very excellent education. I was in the academic track. My high school, you could go to a career track where you could graduate from high school and go right into industry. Whether it was construction, media, they had a track where you could literally graduate from high school and go into licensed type trades. I chose college track because I was the first in my mother's side of the family and my father's side of the family to get a 4-year college degree. So I felt an obligation. It wasn't a question of if I was going to go to college, it was a question of where, based on my mother and father's influence. I am a lost son of the South returning. People look at me, what do you mean lost son of the South? Well, as you know, during a period of history, after the 20s, there was a large migration north. My father's family is from Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was born 3 years after I call it a massacre. History books call it a riot. And my mother's family's, one of my father's families from Anderson, South Carolina, which is a few miles north of here. I used to stand in the bathroom doorway when my dad was shaving, getting ready to go to his store. He had a health and beauty aid store in Harlem. And he would tell me about what he learned from his relatives growing up and what happened to Greenwood and why. So I kind of grew up with this understanding that at one time, prior to integration in Greenwood, $1 turned over 1,000 times before it left the black side of town. Let me repeat that. It's called a multiplier effect in economics. My degree is from the business school, Syracuse University Whitman School of Management. So today, just to give you an idea, what that means is $1 changed hands 1,000 times, which meant that it went from the barber to the grocer, to the movie house, to the cab company. All the businesses on the Greenwood side in Tulsa were black owned. Everything, bus company, everything was black owned. Real estate, for the most part. White folks still have some of their ownership over on the side of town, but a lot of the real estate was owned by people that look like you and I. Today, in the year 2019, $1 earned from someone who lives in the black community turns over less than 1 time before it leaves. Less than 1 time. So I grew up on understanding what that meant and the history of what it meant to be in control of your politics, your community, and your business, and your economics. My My dad was also very influenced by the movement, Marcus Garvey. In Harlem, there was a lot of conversation during the period of time that he had his store buying into the Marcus Garvey philosophy. So I grew up understanding about buying from your own, investing in your own, and the importance of civil rights, although I didn't know what it meant at the time as a young kid. Well, the civil rights concept came out of the civil rights movement, and Dr. King addressed it as an economic justice issue, meaning that we needed to spend money amongst ourselves and that the majority community should also spend money with us. So if we pay taxes into the city coffers, county coffers, or the state coffers, then some of that money should circulate back to black-owned businesses in the purchasing of goods and services from those local governments. And that's where the concept of civil rights and economic justice was originated from. I know you've heard conversation about reparations. Well, let me put this in perspective so we have a clear understanding of what we're talking about in economic terms. At 400 years ago, those freed from slavery have received the 40 acres and a mule. We'd have 6 million more jobs held by African Americans in this country. 6 million more jobs. There would be 1.4 million more African American owned businesses. There would be $1 trillion more in revenue by African American owned businesses. 1 trillion, not billion, trillion. And as an ethnic group, we would have $8 trillion more in net worth right now. Right now, the average net worth of an African American owned family is less than $200.
200 what?
$200. The average net worth today, $200. That depressed me when I read that. Just suppose the European immigrants that came here, it's approximately 1.4 million, they received 120 million acres. Let me repeat that. They received 120 million acres of land for free from our government when they came here. And they took over the West, the Midwest, Southwest, which mostly was Mexico, and Native American land. But that's the disparity and the difference between the way our ancestors were treated after slavery and immigrants that came here. In addition to that, reparations were paid to slave owners for having had their slaves freed. I don't have the stats on that, but I'm sure it was a lot of money. It was about $300 per slave at that time, which today's dollars, you're talking about maybe $12,000, $15,000, somewhere in that ballpark.
How much was it per slave? 300?
$300. Reparations paid to slave owners.
Per slave.
Per slave. And yet we didn't get our 40 acres and a mule. I had to give you that history and that background so you can understand the dynamics of what we're talking about today. And the amount of land that we've owned coming down, forget about the 40 acres and a mule, we've lost 15 million acres of land because descendants haven't gone back to claim it. Some of it was ripped off by the local folks. Some was purchased, etc. But we have lost, as a people, so much acreage in this country that we actually did own at one time. And that's where wealth comes from. My dad used to tell me, son, this is why I wound up in real estate. He says, son, buy real estate because they don't make any more of them. So I graduated with a degree in real estate and urban development and a minor in engineering. So how did this get dealt with down through the years? In 1978, a congressman named Parent Mitchell, I think he was from Baltimore, Maryland area, from the state of Maryland, passed a bill called the Surface Transportation Act, which required that a certain percentage of subcontracts and contracts from federal DOT money that was spent for highways, bridges, roads, etc., would have to go to minority firms. Now that definition really started out as African Americans, and over the years it's been diluted to include everything that you can imagine that they could slide up under the umbrella, and we kind of got pushed outside the umbrella. So, for example, in 1991, State Representative Cynthia McKinney was approached by a bill to push for the conducting of a study to find out how much money was actually being purchased by state agencies, and particularly the university system. And there's a chart in you can look at this later. I'm not going to go through the details now, but there's a chart in your package which explains and shows you the percentage that was actually spent. And subsequent studies, and there's also a document in there, I think it was 1991, I believe, following that study, which indicated that less than 2% had been spent with African American owned businesses. Bring that to today, the most recent study, and I've worked on disparity studies all over the country with a company called Mason Tillman Associates as a consultant, doing disparity studies around the country. I've done stuff all over the country, Oakland, New York City, New York State. I've been participating in disparity studies all over the country. And the gentleman, Rodney Strong, attorney Rodney Strong, whose company did the study for DOT here in Georgia, the last two studies and the most recent study confirmed again that based upon the availability of African American owned contractors, which is around 14%, they have to determine the availability before they can determine whether there's a disparity. So you compare the availability with what's actually being spent, and what's actually being spent is around 2% with African American owned firms. As it relates to white female-owned businesses at DOT, their availability, their contracting is more, almost double what their availability is. So a lot of money is going to women-owned firms, and they said, well, we can't find a black firm, so we'll substitute that with the women goal. So once you put it under a category disadvantage, then you have to look at what's under disadvantage. You say, oh, women, African Americans, oh my goodness. So that's how they get us. So back in, what's this now? 2019, 40 years go by fast. Around 2013, 2014, I approached Roger. I was, like I said, I was volunteering in his office. And I said, Roger, I said, if I do the research, would you introduce a bill to create a minority business program in the state of Georgia to require the state to do a disparity study and establish goals that we can measure to keep them in compliance with doing business with our companies? He said yes. So I did the research. I've been actively involved in New York State over the years with the state program in New York and the legislature in New York. And so I modeled it after the New York law, tailoring it to Georgia. The first couple of sessions, we could not get a committee hearing on the bill, because the bill has to go to a committee. And the chairman of the committee from South Georgia said, well, if I give you a hearing, what you're going to do is you're going to beat up on white business owners, white male business owners. I just said, no. This is to determine how best to include all of the taxpayers in Georgia in the money that's spent by the state of Georgia. So we didn't get a hearing that year. 2 years later, we got a hearing. Sat in the committee, and a white female business owner who's a legislator, she was questioning me and Roger, and she said, well, if we pass this and we increase purchasing with minority-owned firms, that's going to hurt our businesses. I said, how so? She said, well, with the DOT program right now, this white company's going out of business because so much business is going to black firms. I said, whoa, time out. And Roger kicked me under the table. Shut up, shut up. I wanted to cuss out. So he took the mic from me and explained, no, that's not the case. You know, the stats prove differently currently. And all we're trying to do is have economic parity. And they didn't want to hear that. That was the last time we had a hearing on the bill, and we've introduced it every session since then. So, what happened is, in the legislature, you have to barter and trade. You want support for, Doug wants support for his bill? Well, Doug, you got my vote, but I need your support for my bill. And that's kind of how it goes. And then sometimes, they need minority legislators to vote for a bill in order to get it passed, because there may be a split between the majority party, which is the Republican Party right now, in terms of getting that bill passed. And in some cases, a bill needs 2/3 majority because it's a referendum bill and has to go on a state ballot and people vote on it. That's a referendum bill. That requires 2/3. Well, a couple of years back, there was a transportation referendum. I don't know if you remember that. It passed, and the voters approved it. But during the discussion, Roger raised the issue, well, what about minority business participation? We're going to increase sales tax around the state. This money is all going to transportation. What about the inclusion? What about the civil rights of my community? So the governor sent the transportation commissioner down to meet with the Black Caucus, and Bill was there. Bill laid it on him. And the commissioner said, well, look, instead of putting this in the bill, I'll send you a memorandum of understanding that I will make sure that this state dollars for transportation, because remember, this state dollars wasn't under the federal guidelines where you had to have participation. Well, you know, we'll make sure you guys get taken care of. Well, the bill passed, the referendum passed, the bill came due from us. No participation that you can speak of. They can't even measure it. Well, what happened? We gave up our leverage. Our legislators gave up their leverage. At that point said, no, we're not voting for this unless an amendment is made to this bill, which includes the contents of what Roger Bruce has tried to do for the last several years. That didn't happen. We took the promise. Now, there's another way that we can implement a participation through executive order. And Governor Miller did at one point. And we're getting ready to research to see if that's actually has never been changed. Because once a governor does an executive order, unless a succeeding governor comes in and changes it, it survives the administration. Nobody's ever checked. Bill said, I'm going to check this year. Well, that executive order basically required that the state agencies report to the legislature and the governor annually on what their participation has been. And again, that's for all state agencies. We haven't seen that. There's been no report to the legislature or the governor in 12 years that I know of since I've been here. So we don't know if the executive order was actually quietly killed or survived and it's on the desk, on the shelf somewhere collecting dust and nobody knows about it. But that's the legislative side and the political side of what we've tried to do in terms of minority participation and the civil rights movement. So now, in your handout, there's a copy of the governor's executive order you can look at your leisure. There's copies of the disparity studies results in the past that I just talked about. But I want to bring your attention to the pig. I'll call him a hog. He looks bigger than the pig. And remember we talked about the dollar turning over, the multiplier effect in Greenwood 1,000 times? Okay. Well, as a result of the integration movement, what really happened was our dollars got integrated into the white community, our political power got diluted, our economic base got destroyed, So black consumers, while they have more money to spend than a couple of countries combined, everybody's eating off of our contribution to GDP, but us. When I say us, I'm talking about black-owned businesses, because that's what I am. White businesses, Asians, and others have figured out a way to convince us that the white man's ice is colder than ours. Can you relate to that? Colder than ours. We get it from the same place. God provides the rain. We put it in the freezer. It comes out as ice. But we have been convinced as consumers, one, that their ice is colder than ours, and two, through the destruction of black-owned businesses through economic cycles, like the last, they call it the Great Recession, I call it the Great Depression. Because if you look at the stats, it was comparable to the first depression that they talked about in this country. But for black-owned businesses, black-owned homeowners, it was a depression. It was a depression. Somebody had a stunned look on their face when I said $200 in net worth. Well, the biggest reason was because of the Great Recession. When the banks and financial institutions created the collapse through these mortgage products and putting a lot of folks in homes they could not afford, and the government bailed out the banks instead of the homeowners. What the government should have done was bought your mortgage from the bank, kept you in your house, and structured it in a way that you could afford to keep your home. But because we didn't have a lobbyist like a Bill Cannon in Washington, who was an advocate for us, the guys with the money got what they want. So we are in a desperate situation. Particularly our young people don't understand the history of some of the things I just talked about. They don't understand the importance of spending money with your own. They don't understand the importance of acquiring assets that appreciate. They don't understand the importance of going into business, buying existing firms, learning how to do business. And if we don't turn that around, we're going to be in worse shape than ever. Why do you say that, Rodney? Because of artificial intelligence and automation. I want you to research artificial intelligence. I want you to research the workforce of the future. Because if you got kids and grandkids, like I do, I want to know what kind of jobs are going to be available for them and what they should be learning right now to be able to work in the future. I don't know if you heard about this concept called minimum guaranteed income. There's a couple of candidates running for president right now that are talking about that. Yang, the Asian guy, a couple of others. Guaranteed minimum income. What they want to do is tax the robots, because they're the ones that are doing the production, put that money in a fund that provides a guaranteed income for folks who are human. We are on the verge of I call it the Great Reconstruction, post-Obama. We are in a period of history that, in my lifetime, I thought I'd never see. But as you know, things go in cycles. And when they say we want to make America great again and take back our country, you know what that means. So we have to be vigilant. We have to understand the times that we're in. How do we generate a civil rights agenda? How do we participate in it as citizens? What is our role and what is government's role? Because right now, if I wanted to go out and get a job, depending on what part of the country I'm in, it very most likely would not be a black-owned business. Because there are not enough of us to hire us. So we're at the mercy of the larger corporations. Now, to the benefit, to the credit of some of the major corporations in this country, Fortune 500 companies. They see the benefit in purchasing goods and services from us. Why? Because of my heart. Because we're a major consumer group. And it's good business. It's good business to do business with us because they are trying to get our dollars as consumers. But government doesn't see it that way unless it has the political will to do so. In New York right now, the governor's pushed a goal of 30% of all procurement going to, quote, minority-owned businesses, minority women-owned businesses. I never thought I'd see that. I didn't even think it could be justifiable. But the point is, if there's the political will to do something, it'll get done. This session, the hemp bill, medical marijuana, CBD oil. Again, we dealt with the same issue, participation. But they got some of our legislators caught up on the issue of, well, don't worry about the minority business participation. Be concerned about the kids that need the medical oil. Well, we can be concerned about the kids and the business. So the caucus, the Black Legislative Caucus in the Senate, was able to at least get them to increase the number of small licenses that would be going out. They were able to get a black college, Fort Valley State, as part of one of the 2 universities that would be doing research on medical marijuana. But there was no requirement for participation of minority-owned businesses. Why is that important? Well, hell, excuse my French, look at the prisons. Look at the sentences that our folks got for trying to make a living off of a non-lethal plant. Look at the drug dealers today that are pushing fentanyl and oxycodone in communities around this country, and now it's a major medical issue. It's a crisis in this country. Why? Because most of the people affected by it don't look like you and I. Well, who are the dealers? It's not my brothers and sisters on the street corner. It's Big Pharma. Why is I know you've heard the stories. They're They're providing marketing and sales commissions to the doctors who are pushing this drug, which is 10 times worse than some of the stuff that I grew up around, which was heroin. How can you have something on the street that's 10 times worse than heroin? I don't understand it. But our folks are in prison now doing long-term sentences because of possession and marketing of the same product that they're getting ready to market now, and in some states it's recreational. And you cannot find anyone who looks like us to the percentage of our population that owns those licenses or owns those stores or owns the grow houses that are participating in an industry that they put us in jail for a long time. So there's a disparity in this country as it relates to people of color. And we have to speak up on it. We have to educate our young so they understand, because they've grown up in an era where they had a black president for 8 years. They had the media saying this is a post-racial society. Well, no, it never was. It was just hidden. And with the change in administration, you've seen it come out from under the ground, from out behind the bushes. So we have to be vigilant right now. We have to demand civil rights as the last leg of the civil rights movement for our country and for our people. And on that, I'd be more than happy to take any questions that you might have. I didn't mean to depress anybody. Yes, sir.
Based on what you have presented, I remember a story that Martin Luther King really wasn't killed about his working with black folks. It's when he stepped over the line and started talking about economics that put him in trouble.
That's correct.
Isn't that where that term came from?
What's that, right now?
Black civil rights. Martin Luther King.
That's correct. That's correct. He started talking about civil rights. Exactly. he touched on the primal forces of nature. What do I mean by that?
Money.
The war-industrial complex.
Eisenhower.
The military-industrial complex. When he spoke against the Vietnam War, it wasn't simply because a lot of brown and black kids were going over there to the front line. Yes, he talked about that, but he was talking, and that was his focus. But really the impact was the military-industrial complex. They had to have some place to sell their bombs, sell their airplanes, sell their munitions. And if you know, that was never a declared war, that was a conflict. So you're right, that's exactly why he was taken from us, in my belief. That's what I believe.
Me too.
I can't put it as an authoritarian because I wasn't in the FBI, I wasn't part of that crew. I wasn't in J. Edgar's office. I wish I would have been a fly on the wall. But I do recall a statement that was attributed to J. Edgar, and that was, the greatest threat to America is the unification and the unity of black people. The greatest threat to America. But yet we were the biggest asset to America. America's an economic power right now because of our ancestors. Plain and simple.
Which is what Du Bois said in 1903.
Exactly. If you don't know your history, you're doomed to relive it. Our young people, it's our obligation, my silver-haired brothers in this room, to make sure those coming behind us understand this. And as a child standing in the listening to my father talk about what his ancestors went through in his hometown, it shook my soul. I've spent my entire career as a professional in my own company acting as Robin Hood. What do you mean, Rodney? Robin Hood. I take a lot of pride in that term. I put more money from white banks in black and Hispanic business folks' hands, so much so, they fired some of the loan officers at some of the banks that I was able to get loans for my people for, to put them in business, to buy businesses, to acquire real estate. Yes, I took pride in that, because that's the way I was raised. But that's my point. If we're not raising our kids with this knowledge and this information, they won't know what to do with it. They won't know. And we're in an era right now where communications is unbelievable. In Egypt, they did a whole revolution on social media. They turned the country over with social media in a revolution. So the women, after 45, I'm in church, so I'm going to respect, I'm not going to pose. 45 got elected. The weekend after that, there were women in pink all over this country and the world protesting his being sworn in. That was all organized on social media. We live in a very, very unique period of history right now in terms of being able to get a message out, getting people mobilized, and getting them to do. The most important thing that we can do with our young people is explain to them the importance of civil rights, spending money in your own community, acquiring wealth. There's ways to do it. That my dad used to tell me, if you don't know something, go ask somebody who does and find out. So it's not like we can't find out. It's all around us. So Men of Radcliff, I challenge you to spread the word so that Dr. King didn't die in vain, Malcolm didn't die in vain, Marcus didn't die in vain, that we've got to initiate in this country a civil rights agenda for our people.